Cups. Of course, what we've got to deal with is the religious iconography that turns up on all of these fucking cards. And in the majority of them, in many instances, you're going to be looking at some form of Kabbalah or another, because they do come through those schools. And there is a religious touch to the idea of the white hand holding the chalice like some fucking priest, with the white dove and the little round white thing with a little cross on it. So I ignore it completely. Yeah. It represents the word love. So then we have to take to pieces what the word love means. And that's really important. I think the only language that I'm aware of is Arabic, that's got 17 words for the word love. I'm sure that's very different in every other language except English. But we've got them, and we just have to know them, and they are respect and reciprocity and mutuality, and a feeling that's beautiful to feel. It's got nothing necessarily to do with another person. And it can be as simple as I love my dinner. It doesn't have to be big. And this is really important with the Ace of Cups, again, depending on what it falls with. Okay. It can represent, if it falls with the Devil card, it's going to be liquor. Or it can be poison, the liquid kind. So, but the essence of it without any of that is love. So that's the Ace of Cups. Two of Cups, sex.
So if the Ace of Cups falls with the Two of Cups, that's really good.
Sex. Well, again, if it turns up with the Eight of Pentacles, you've got to respect the sex worker, because it will. And on the Tree of Life, on the Stargate, is going to turn up in the Sphere Netzach. And the other one, the Eight of Pentacles, that turned up in the Sphere of Netzach, it's kind of chicken and the egg, because Netzach, of course, is associated with Venus. So the Eight of Pentacles turned up there for the first person that I ever had who ran two houses, two brothels. And so there's the productivity associated with it. People who think they know tarot will say to me, "Is this got to do with sacred sex?" I go, "There's nothing sacred about sex. It's just sex. How you feel is up to you. But don't put a fucking adjective in front of sex unless it's the adjective that says good sex. Because we can't have bad sex, as you know. But it is sex. And sometimes I'm trapped in the caduceus. Sometimes I'll see it as a really, really good alliance. If it turns up with the Ace of Cups, it's usually romantic love. Yeah. It will always depend on the third card or the fifth card if there's 5 in a row. And if it turns up with the Hierophant, it does tend to be marriage before the shit hits the fan. And they're, of course, they're in the same map. If you're looking at, for example, the Grove, in the same map, you could have underneath this 10 of Swords, 3 of Swords, 9 of Swords. And I'm going, oops. So you're seeing the violation and the separation at the same time as you're seeing the love and the marriage, you see. But tarot doesn't differentiate the timing. It's just going to show you. And it's like, does this happen before the marriage? Does it happen after the marriage? Was it the same marriage? So it's a matter of, and you'll get it. You'll get it. You just, I mean, I just tend to swear a lot. And I'll go, oh, there's marriage here. It's got lots and lots of love and it's got lots and lots of sex, but fuck, you're going to have troubles. And you don't have to give any more than that. You haven't got to dissect it. You get me? It's really important, actually, that you don't dissect it. Because when you do dissect it, you're actually almost justifying yourself in a way. You don't want to do that. Okay? You want to do that. The Two of Cups is just sex. Can be a partnership. The Three of Cups. Three of Cups is, I call it the Witches of Eastwick. not that many people will know what that movie was all about in the future, but I call it my coven card too, because I really love those three people are connected. They are absolutely united. Those three, they're absolutely united. So this is your posse. I mean, if you're getting reading for somebody else and this one turns up, if you turn up, the other thing, there's polyamory. Posse, always three or more people, yeah. Two people's a conspiracy, three people's a posse. But when it turns up with the two of cups, it's polyamory. So you've got more than two people involved in the intimacy. Very definitely. Okay. It'll turn up with new businesses forming. It'll turn up with money and finances. It'll turn up with workers that you're working with. It's just never a problem, ever. Okay. Some of them sort of don't mean much, except what they fall with. This is really interesting, the Four of Cups, because if you take it into account, what that little person is doing is sitting under the tree, looking at their options, looking at what's available to them. And there's something hanging around. And it's very interesting when it turns up with the Eight of Cups. Because when you look at the Eight of Cups, you see how the cup's missing? There it is. So that person with the Eight of Cups can be walking away from emotionally dysfunctional relationships, which is what they are doing. And they can feel really distressed and really upset and in the liminal space of what Joseph Campbell calls the process of initiation. But they're not turning around, they're not hanging on to it. And if the Four of Cups turns up, it's like who you end up with or what takes its place is nothing that you're looking at. Nobody that you're looking at. And it's a similar thing if you've got the Eight of Cups and the Ace of Cups turns up, because it still fills in that gap, you see. And you're looking for patterns when you look at tarot. So this one's basically saying love can't happen unless you fuck off the one that you love now. So you think you love who you love, and you do love who you love, but it's not going to last because in comes this extra bit, you see. And it could be life wanting you to explore the roots of the powers of what love actually is. And it can't happen until you have that disappointment.
Is it an offer? I've heard you say that before. Four of Cups, like an offer.
Or that which is unexpected.
Hmm.
Or that was just missing. See, with the Ace of Cups, you see how it's missing? There's a cup missing. That's the whole point. There it is. Right there. And it's not something they're looking at. So it turns up out of the blue. It can be an offer. It can be the old-fashioned ideas of this is an offer or a gift. But if you get stuck with that instead of looking at the other things, it's a similar thing when it turns up with the Five of Cups, because the Five of Cups is someone who's backward looking and in mourning, but they don't know about this unless this comes first. If this comes first and that comes after it, the unexpected emotional connection causes grief. And it all depends on where everything falls. It depends on whether it's the beginning or the end. Each of these is a sentence. And of course, with the Four of Cups, which is the unexpected emotional connection, what actually happens is somebody's going to get hurt if a person's already in a relationship, or even if it's a single person with kids, or the person that they fall in love with doesn't fit in with the community or the religion or the ideology that your client is currently associated with. Somebody's going to get hurt, always. This is the thing about when you let go of any kind of relationship, is somebody going to get hurt. And there comes the liminal space again. So that liminal space, is that for your client? Or is it for the person who's left behind? For that, you're going to need other cards that relate to cups in the actual map. So I had well, let's go there. So that's the Four of Cups, is the unexpected emotional connection. It can be the fourth offer. It can be the fourth offer. And then telling you this one before about the Russian woman who came 4 times about the sale of her house and that she took the fourth offer. Yeah, well, that was this little one that kept turning up. 4 of Cups. So 5 of Cups, if we just looked at, it's absolutely grief and mourning. Now, it can be grief and mourning that is associated with a death. That death is going to show up on the table. It can be grief and mourning at being betrayed. Grief and mourning doesn't need a meaning, does it? It is what it is. But what's really important when you're dealing with the client is there's 2 cups that behind them and not looking at them. And there is a tendency amongst some, and quite a lot actually, over a lifetime, of Librans. When a Libran's in balance, they're really in balance. But when they're out of balance, they dwell on the past. They can't let the past go. And very often this will turn up for a person of swords, a Libran person, or someone who is involved in a relationship with a Libran person, so that they get used to the fact that that person never turns around and looks at the present moment. They're always backward looking. The fact that there's 2 cups upright behind them, all they got to do is turn around, get involved with their life and move on with their life. That's sort of it. Okay, that's the 5 of Cups. It's always grief though. 6 of Cups, this one can be so fucking tricky because on its own, or when it with a lot of cards, it means the past. But yesterday I had a person for a reading, she's going for IVF, and she said, do you reckon I'll have any kids in the future? I said, 2. There's 2 kids in that picture. And it was, funnily enough, her key ended up being the 10 of Cups. And what do you see in the 10 of Cups? Those 2 kids. So this interrelationship is really significant when you're looking. You try not to sort of think about the meaning. You don't think about the meaning without looking. Unfortunately, people who are blind can't read tarot. They'll have to use another means. You've got to actually look. But the 10 of Cups is the same 2 kids. And that ended up being the person's key, with a couple of other cards, by the way. So it was quite obvious. And this person was in love with their partner. They're having a yummy time while they go through the IVF because he's got 0 sperm. And rather than going with a sperm donor, they're actually going, when they're going with a sperm donor, but they're going with an IVF thing. So that's the 6 of Cups. But when it turns up with a property, it's usually an old one. It has a heritage, or it has a history. Very often, if it comes with a 6 of Swords and travel of any kind, it can become quite hilarious. And I'm known to tell people, when you get where you're going, you're going to go back where you used to be. And when you get there, you're going to go back where you used to be. And they'll say, what the fuck? And I go, that's it. It can be a person who lives in 2 places at the same time. And a lot of people do. That's the 6 of Cups. Whole heap of different meanings. But look, when you put them together, there's a person who's sort of trapped in the past. And it could be to do with the family that's no longer in there. And if that's family member, you quite often find that the death of the grandparents or the parents is going to turn up. Or they're still in mourning for the death to do with the family. Because that 10 of Cups is not just a house, it's a dwelling, it's a home, it's a family as well. So 7 of Cups. Mira says, what do you mean by a person who lives in 2 places at once? Well, I don't live in the Byron Shire anymore, but I do. All my family's there. I also live in Melbourne because my daughter's there. So and some people have 2 houses. Barry Humphries had 2 houses. He had a house in Australia and a house in London. Lynn Franks I did reading for. She had a house in London. She had a house in Mallorca. So people do have two houses, two homes, okay, and they will go between them quite regularly. And then you'll have a person, for example, who has their home in Byron Bay. This is typical, has their home in Byron Bay, and they've got a shed out the back. And so they rent out the house and they move into the shed out the back, but the shed out the back is also their home because it's really decorated well. And it's really interesting also insofar as I will find it with nomadic people. Because they'll do a circuit going back where they used to be. So every place they go is home. That can be really important as well. 7 of Cups means nothing. I do call it my bullshit card. It will turn up with, it doesn't mean much on its own. It's just pipe dreaming. It's like, what the fuck ever. You just think in this. It doesn't make it real. Just because you want it doesn't make it real. So it will turn up with somebody who is delusional or who wants something that's not going to happen. It's just like, want means nothing. And it's like with politicians when they say, we're sending you our hopes and prayers. It's like 7 of Cups. You know, hopes and prayers are not going to rebuild Gaza. That's it. It's sort of that. It will turn up with indulgences that tarot doesn't consider addictions. So if a person enjoys, for example, a week's worth of sort of like wine every night, it's not an addiction. If it's an addiction, it turns up with the devil card every fucking time. If it turns up with the moon card, it's mental illness every time. It's a person who's not quite sure what's real and what's not real. It seriously turns up with them, but it does have to be with the moon card for that. It's turned up, for example, in a dead reckoning map in the sphere of the environment. You know, the 4 up the side? The first one's got to do with the self. The second one's the environment. If this turns up in the environment, they're going to not be living anywhere for a while. And you'll very often get that when people are between homes, between houses, when they're hanging about and they might be living in a tent or they might be living in a hotel or they could be just living in a rental for a while, but it doesn't feel like anything to them. And it won't be anything. It'll be sort of like just being in thick air for a while. So it's nowhere in particular, which is also really important because it will turn up in that particular place. And also, which is really interesting when it turns up in a Stargate, if it turns up in the center, Tiferet, it says, none of this is about you. So they're not there. You get me? It'll be a similar thing in a dead reckoning if it turns up in the sphere of self. I'll say, you don't matter to anything I'm going to say. Does that mean they're not there? This is not about them. That's the 7 of Cups. It's really quite a beautiful story in a weird kind of way. But it'll really pinpoint if the person's asking a question about a child or an adolescent, for example, who's going through a process of psychosis. This one is going to be there with the moon card. And you can go straight to it and you can talk around it. But it's also very interesting insofar as in really productive. If it turns up with the Ace of Wands, it's a person who's got a really, really good imagination. So it's still in that absolute or pre-absolute state, which is why we needed to sort of like learn all that terminology before we got going. With the Ace of Wands also, when it comes through as being a book or a story, it's fiction, whatever fiction is. Fiction just means you can't source it as having supposed fact that's authorized by somebody. Like George Orwell's 1984 was fiction, wasn't it? So it sort of would have turned up with that, with some kind of o in there. So that's your 7 of Cups. Where's your 8 of Cups? We've done the 8 of Cups. 8 of Cups, we had a little look at that. Now, the 8 of Cups is extremely sad. You've got to go there with your client. You've got to acknowledge how incredibly fucking brave they are. to leave behind someone they love, to leave behind somewhere they love. They're incredibly fucking brave because that red cloak that they're wearing is life. The red represents the blood of life. And the fact that they're under a dark moon means they don't know where they're going. Lots and lots of legends in here. One of the legends is if you cross water, spells can't follow you. And they're in the marshland. So they're in a liminal space. This is very much a card of initiation. And so often when I see this, I'll look and I'll feel the, oh yeah, you'll feel it. I'll feel the grief they're going through. Absolutely feel it. And I'll just look at the cards and they'll see me with that look on my face that I can't hide my looks. I can't hide the expressions that come on my face. And then I'll look up at them and I'll go, you're an incredibly brave human being. And then they will invariably weep because they know exactly what you're talking about. Because it takes real courage to leave behind an adult child, for example, who's treating you like shit, a partnership that's no longer viable because the other person concerned can't leave the drugs alone. Whatever happens to be the reason for walking away, it's necessary, but the person doesn't know where they're going to yet. And the last thing they need is the fucking Five of Cups. Because the Five of Cups is dwelling on what's happened instead of trusting the initiation process. If it turns up with the Four of Cups, there we go. Okay, it will show itself within the same period as they're going through that initiation. And that's what Joseph Campbell calls the return. When you're recognized for your new self, for your true self, and not for who you were when you were stuck in that situation. So many people I know who've woken up in the midst of their relationships to understand themselves as a mystic. They break away from a community of being involved with the church, for example, and they have to leave their family behind. Their family won't speak to them. Jehovah's Witnesses is a perfect example. Mormons is another example of that. And they go and they have no idea how to be in the world. And this is that. So you're there and you are the person who recognizes the return. You are the initiator. Do you get me? You are on the other end of that fucking string when you tell them that you recognize what they're going through, that you recognize their bravery, and to just fucking keep going. And you can tell them every obstacle they go through, because tarot will tell every obstacle that they're going to go through, whether it's court, whether they're going to go through prison, whether they're going to mourn the death of a child, whether they're going to mourn the death of a parent, whether they're going to mourn the loss of a country, whether they're going to feel like they're never going to get back on their feet again because their company's just gone bust. You name it, they're all the reasons that person's walking away from that which they can't stay with anymore, because who the fuck stays with something that's just going to collapse and keep on collapsing? That's what's happening with the Eight of Cups. And you are their initiator. You're going to tell them that they're going through a process of initiation and that they will come out the other side, and they're not going to know what the fuck's going on for I don't know how long. And invariably their client's going to say, how long is this going to last? And I'll say, I don't know. But nothing lasts forever. And you don't have to do anything except let them weep. But 9 times out of 10, when this one turns up, your client's going to weep. Okay, 9 of Cups, or the wish card. But it can also be gluttony. And it can also be greed. And it can also be a hoarder. You do have to work that out again by the cards that are around it. If it's the foundation to a question, am I going to move to Paris? This says yes. It's that simple. A person's going through this intense grief, and then this one turns up, go, you will be happy. And if they say, what the fuck happiness is, I said, you can tell me when you get there. I expect a phone call. So that's very, very important, but it can, if it's going to turn up with the devil card, of course, it's obesity, it's gluttony, it's hoarding, it's too much, because there's too many fucking cups behind that little bastard, and he's too fucking smug. So there are cards that'll turn up where you can't stand. And if you don't like them, your client's not going to like them. And it's really important to say that. So often my clients will come back to me and they go, you didn't like the person, and they ended up being hateful. I wouldn't. My feelings were your feelings. I didn't tell them on the day. Oops. But that's the 9 of cups. So it ultimately is the wish card. With a question, if a person says, am I going to get the job I've just applied for? And that one turns up after the first 6 cards. When they lay out the 7th card, you go, yes. I go, I couldn't be bothered doing the rest of the cards. Ask another fucking question. And I'll put it away. I couldn't be bothered laying out another fucking 6 or 7 cards. What's the point? This is yes. Okay. The Knight of Cups is next. The Knights are never people. Get that real clear. The Knights are movements. And the Knight of Cups really has only one meaning, and it hasn't changed pretty much ever in 40 odd years, and that is trust the process. And again, if it's because the 8 of Cups is trust, because that's one of the key notes of love is trust. Okay, no betrayals happen. So that person can be treading through an incredibly horrendous legal battle. They can be trying to work hard. They can escape from a predator when they're being catfished, when they're being blackmailed. They could, and sometimes you can tell them that you're going to wait years, but trust the process. Like years ago, I remember telling Richard Wiltshire, who's Virginia's son, who was working in Melbourne at Retrovision, and his family split up and he didn't get custody of his kids. And this one turned up as the foundation that said, stay the course. He said, what do you mean? I said, stay the course, do their birthdays, stay with it, trust the process. And eventually both the boys came to him. He had to wait from when they were 3 and 4 years old to when they were teenagers. It's not about how long. It's about whether or not they can actually trust. And that'll happen when a person's changing jobs, when they're looking like they're in the gutter, they've got no fucking home. However it happens to be, this one turns up and they're on easy. It's almost better, in a weird kind of way. One could be better than another, than the 9 of Cups, because it's almost better. I haven't got the 10 of Cups yet to bypass that, but it's almost better because it's part of the journey, you get me. And it takes a lot for people to trust. It's not naivety, it's actual trust. So if a person is put their house on the market and their house is not selling, and this turns up as a foundation, and quite often it's a foundation, tell them to trust the process and just fucking don't stop. Yeah, and invite me to the new place when the time comes, and they do. So the 10 of Cups. The 10 of Cups is, we've really covered this before. I do know we have. And I've covered it also in tarot theory and practice quite widely, because that turned up, and it took me a long time to work it out. It turned up as the outcome for my first HIV/AIDS client. And because he said, I know, I said, I know, because I saw the bowling alley, the Grim Reaper in the bowling alley ad. Fucking line of Grim Reapers all doing a bowling alley and knocking 10 pins over. And he didn't know he was going to die. But then that raised up so many questions, and it's still as interesting and exciting today as it was the first time I noticed it. Because what it said was, your destiny is home. You're going home. So I'm going, what the fuck? And I do know that in his reading was the 10 of Swords death card, was the Ace of Swords death card. It would be absolutely awful retrospectively when I remember. And then I got hundreds of these boys. And that was one of the times that I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making a mistake because it's repeating itself over and over and over and over and over as the outcome. And it wasn't until it really clicked, because I was seeing the death of their lovers, and I was seeing the death of their sons, and I was seeing the death of their brothers, and the suicides that were necessary by so many of them with their Nembutal before it went too fucking far down the rabbit hole and they ended up in hospital completely and absolutely decimated. It kept coming and coming and coming, but this was always for the client. And this was tarot saying, let's have a look at the experience of death, shall we? And let me tell you what it isn't. And the closest I could come to it, again, taking Kabbalah into account, was the stylized tree of life, which you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the speculative 11, yeah? It's exactly the same pattern as hopscotch. And in hopscotch, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 feet, back together, 2 feet, back together. The outcome, the way we used to draw it in chalk on the pavement was home was a semicircle. And when you got there, or when your tall went in there, you were fucking won the game. And then you turned around and came back again. So it's got that sensation of being the Mobius veil. Similarly, it can be a house. And it will show up with real estate dealers, with people that are working in that industry. It'll show out particularly to do with family, which means it's a home rather than a house. The Ten of Pentacles can be a dwelling place. But the Ten of Cups has got more ness to it. It's got just more emotional connection to it. The Page of Cups, if it turns up with the Chariot card, it is the time of Cancer. If it turns up with the Death card, it is the time of Scorpio. If it turns up with the Moon card, it's usually the time of Pisces. You probably know all those dates, so you can find them out. I wouldn't always trust that as being an absolute, because very often the Page of Cups can be an artistic project or the arts in general. But it's not necessarily talking just about painting. It represents the word art. And a human being can be an art form, the way you walk down the street, the way you dress yourself. It's all art. People who don't bother, they're not art. Fashion's art, when it's good fashion. Not when there's polystyrene cups on your head that looks like it's trendy or something. What's the connection with the Chariot and Cancer? Chariot cards ruled by the Chariot card is ruled by Cancer. So when it turns up with the Page of Cups, it's the sign of the time of Cancer. So the Death card is ruled by Scorpio. Page of Cups. It's water sign. So your water signs are Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio. So you put that with a journey, with a Wayshower card, and you pick what time of what's supposed to be the ruler of that Wayshower card, and when it's doubled up, when it turns up with the Page of Wands, the Page of Cups, or the Page of Pentacles, it's just saying this is your time sequence. That's why. So it'll be the same thing with the cards that are ruled by the water signs. Now, yes, it can be a water sign child, Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio. Now, in the age of IT, tarot's fucking way ahead of me. I've got to scramble to keep catching up. Tarot's given me the word grommel, Grommel. I don't even know if there is such a word. But a grommel is tarot's way of talking about somebody who works in code. Because it sees them, and this is the image that I get, bent over their machine, doing code, and going, if you ask them anything, they just don't want to talk to you. They've got their Slurpee right there. They've got their pizza right there. They've got their Skittles right there. they've got their face down and they're just doing code. And so tarot likes to call them grommels. And if this one will turn up and I'll say, have you got a water sign child? By any time? And the question time, you got a water sign child? They go, no, I've got an earth sign child. I go, yeah, well, it's a grommel. And they go, what? I said, they're never off their screen. And I mean, nowadays it could be pretty much any child. But it's particularly one who's going to go into the field of IT as they age. And as such, it's brilliant. The other three, Page of Pentacles, the Page of Wands, the Page of Swords, they're not necessarily going to do that. And I don't know why tarot picks these things up. But it does it in such a way as it's ridiculously accurate. So the kings and queens are people of a water sign. I don't like doing gender, so I very, very, very rarely do it. The person is a person of a water sign. And I do tell my clients the word king is a Saxon word for chieftain, and the word queen is a Saxon word for wife. And I'll say, despite the fact I know many queens. And very often they'll look at, in Melbourne, they used to go, yeah. In Tasmania, they go, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going, oh, there's your culture for you. It's quite hilarious, really. But they can be the same person in the same map. So you could have the person, a king, turn up, for example, as the crowning card to the side, and you have the queen as the outcome. It's the same map. And the difficulty that comes for you, because I've been there, is how do we, or do we, and it's a water sign person, by the way, Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio, how do we, or do we differentiate the idea between a king and a queen? And therein lies your deep study into our own bigotry and our own genetic labeling of a person as a king or a queen. What are the tendencies, or what are the tendencies of a king that a queen hasn't got? Do you get me? If I was to go back to the 1950s or 1960s, this would be, hi, honey, I'm home. And this one would be, I've got your dinner on the table, darling. So there would be very specific gender outlines for people. Those lines are long blurred. They probably always were, but they didn't, tarot didn't expect the reader, and me in those days, to go, you're trans. Okay, so it's up to you to keep up with the way, with the knowledge of what's actually happening on a world level and the understandings that have been obfuscated from us for political or ideological or religious reasons. You get me? Got nothing to do with whether you see an Ace of Wands and an Empress card, which is pregnancy. Got nothing to do with when you see an Ace of Wands or a Sun card, which is birth. This is a person. And you will get them in the same. And then you've got to work out sometimes going, am I looking at a bloke, or am I looking at a woman, or am I looking at a bit of both? And it's just also really, really interesting. And you'll learn, and people will also teach you in your community, which is very important. If, for example, you were to go to a country like Iran, you wouldn't get a queen if your life depended on it turning up. Unless she was going to be stoned to death. Because she's exposed herself to you, or to me, or to the public eye. You get me? So it does depend on where you happen to be. And that's cups. What about gestation queen and insemination king? No, I don't even go there with that. I've never been asked about gestation. I've never been asked about insemination. I've seen Ace of Wands, Empress card as pregnancy. Now, pregnancy can stop at a zygote. I will know if it's a zygote, depending on when the death card turns up. So you've got to know that, you just know the, the terminology for a fetus, when a zygote becomes an embryo, and an embryo becomes a fetus, when a fetus becomes a baby. And that also raises up the question of, when does the ness, or the concept of a soul, enter into a human being? And I reckon it's the first moment when they sort of suck air and go, oh, what the fuck have I done? That's why they cry. And they may remember just for a split second, being all the other people they've been, like the Bene Gesserit in Dune. And they go, oh, shit. Okay, mummy tit now. But that idea of insemination, you'll get that with the Ace of Swords. Because insemination, tarot doesn't see it as having to do necessarily with a penis. Okay, it does see it as being an insertion. So it's more to do with the sperm than it does to do with the apparatus that presents the sperm, you see. If you get that. Very interesting. So it's never going to show you an Ace of Wands as a dick, but it will show the Ace of Swords, particularly separately when it's IVF. And very interesting, it'll also turn up, for example, if you're looking at a person who's having a cesarean. But it doesn't look at insemination, no. And it doesn't look at, what was the other part of the question? Jump to the latest, there we go. Gestation, queen, and inseminating, no. They're people. And an idea that's gestating will come to as an Ace of Swords because it's an idea, or a Page of Swords. Because the Page of Swords, or even a Knight of Swords can also be an idea, despite the fact that usually the Knight of Swords is speed. You've just got to work out whether they're driving too fast or whether they're shooting at methamphetamine. And that'll be decided by the other cards that are around it. But the Page of Swords is an idea, and an idea is a thing that is an insemination in a way because it's absolute. And then it's got Baraya and Yetzirah to follow. It follows through in the idea. Ideas can die without coming to maturation, so therefore they don't necessarily always gestate. But I get it, but not in this instance, no. Not with kings and queens. They're people. Any other questions? That's a good one. I mean, they're all going to turn up with different forms of the journey card, the way shower cards, and there's a couple probably we'll look at here. The person of cups with the temperance card, very often a medical practitioner. I'll go through a few of these if that's cool. The person of cups with the Hierophant card is very often a priest or a Christian minister. Person of cups with the Magician card doesn't give me anything. It really doesn't, because I'd need more information to find out whether they were a megalomaniac or whether they were just simply a very clever person, or whether they were an individual who didn't like necessarily interference with anybody else. So it doesn't really mean anything. With the High Priestess card doesn't really mean anything at all. If it had cards in that particular map that had to do with psychology and people working in that industry, then you would be on track with the silence that goes with it. But the Two of Swords, of course, Two of Swords is the journey card, where this is the way shower, and they're pretty much the same card in a weird kind of way. And when they turn up together, that becomes very interesting with that person then, because that is a person of silence. So it could be anybody from a Buddhist monk living in the high country of Tibet to a psychologist or a psychiatrist that is not a father or mother confessor, because there's no religious cards with them. With the Empress, whether it's a queen or a king doesn't really matter. They're fucking good with their fashion. It's a very much a Vavavoom type person. But it would be the same if the Empress turned up with any one of the kings or queens. It had the same kind of effect. Nothing with the Emperor at all. Not enough information. Nothing with the Lover's card at all, not enough information. There's a Cancerian. Remember we talked about the Page of Cups with the Chariot card being the time of the sign of Cancer? That's the Cancerian person. And whatever the third card is or the other 4 or 5, that'll tell you more about that particular person. But when they fall together, they're definitely the sign of Cancer. I tend to say Cancerian because a lot of people look at me with like really scared. When I say, what's your star sign? They go, Cancer. It's a thing. You need to watch that one. Because the big C word's been thrown around so often that a person who's born between the 21st of June and 21st of July freaks out when they tell me that they're a Cancerian. If I say you're a Cancerian, they go, yeah. And it relaxes them. But if I say you're the sign of Cancer, I can see them cringe. It's a weird thing. Okay. Person of Cups with this Strength card doesn't mean much. Probably a bit fit. With the Hermit card, they're a bit old. With the Wheel of Fortune, they're a bit boring, a bit predictable. With the Judgment card, they're a bit adaptable, pretty changeable. And with the World card, they can quite often mean that they're a diver, marine biologist. All the other cards around are going to tell you how associated with the oceanic world they are. They can also be a world traveler. I have had this for people who have been in the Sydney Hobart yacht race, but they'll turn up very often with the 6 of Swords, because the 6 of Swords is a watercraft. Not always, but it can be a watercraft. Pisces. Yep. Hate them. Poor bastard, addict. Or they've got cancer. They're very sick one way or the other. Scorpio. They're a Scorpio with the Death card. Justice card, nothing. Depends on what comes with it. Star card, nothing, except what comes with it. 2 cards on their own, really fucking shaky. With the Hangman, nothing much. They're just a little bit, it could be, you really got to know what's with that Hangman. Again, if it turns up with the 6 of Swords, it's a fisherman. If it turns up with a Fool card, they're likely to be jumping off a fucking cliff. So there's the big difference. Which one's suicide and which one's fishing? Whatever it is, the one thing to know about the Hangman, apart from the fact that it's got to do with the Masonic orders and their initiation process of tying one fucking leg up behind the other, which goes back to the Hiram key. Everybody read the Hiram key? That's an interesting one. Hiram key is these 2 guys who've got together in different ways. They're both researchers, journalists, and they've snuck into the Masonic orders to find out what the initiations are all about. And it goes all the way back to this guy called Hiram. Very interesting reading. But the initiation's got to do with doing your trouser leg up on one leg and tying it behind your fucking back. And if you ever see the Da Vinci Code, Da Vinci's Demons, good series. Anybody seen Da Vinci's Demons? It's fabulous. If you ever feel like sort of like really getting into a little bit of binging, that's one to be. I'm binging Black Mirror at the moment. It's absolutely amazing, the new series. I'm so in love with it. It's so Tarantino. Okay, and with the Tower, whatever's going on, the poor bastard's fucked. And your other cards are going to tell you how they're fucked. Now, interestingly enough, if it turns up with the Page of Cups, it's quite likely to be a storm, but not a long-standing one. It's a very wet phenomenon. Quick downpour that's going to flood the entire region. But pretty much no, okay, that's it. I'm open for question time to do with anything to do with cups or whatever. No, I can't hear you.
I was just debating. I think my question is a bit stupid. It is a stupid question. It is a stupid question, but what is with the creepy lion wing thing?
That's a Masonic. It's all got to do with the idea of first do no harm and healers and one of the four elements and archangels and all that kind of shit. And really, it's just too religious to even be bothered with. It's
Yeah.
the lion kind of thing that you'll get in Persia and you'll get in with supposedly Nebuchadnezzar and along the sort of like Babylonian gate. But that's nothing to do with reading cards. You see, this is
No, it's not.
I mean, you'll find a lot of them have got, not so much with the.
There's a weird little face in the 7. This is a 7,
Okay, so
isn't it? Yeah, but not really.
One. So that's what it is a person who speculates, but who knows nothing. So all of those little bits and pieces in the other cups that are obvious are things that they're thinking about. Oh, they think I'm going to win this. They think there's a fucking dragon coming. They think I'm going to build an Arthurian fucking castle. They think that sort of like some archangel's watching over me. They think that there's a snake in the fucking roof that's going to come down in the middle of the night and fucking drop on me. What is going to happen is covered. So that's why it's a nothing, because it's kind of like they're speculating. It's people who go, and the other thing about the 7 of Cups, because it really pisses me off in a way, is a person who says, and you'll get them a lot, what if I do this? Do you know how much I hate that question? Why? Anybody want to know why? Just ask or give me your opinion.
Because this is about what happens, not about a choice. Like, this is what's going to happen. It happens or it doesn't.
That's the interesting bit, isn't it? People think we have, I mean, there's a very interesting conversation. Is there such a thing as free choice or free will? I don't think there is. You know, what bothers me more than them, though, are the people who say, if I, in relationships, if I hadn't got together with you, do you realize what would have happened in my life? That's just feeble. And it's almost evil because it presumes, it's pulling on Malengro, it assumes or presumes that in some way your life could have been different and you're where you are. So it never could have been different. And everything leads up to the next thing. And the next thing and the next thing. And it's all predestined in a weird kind of way. And I maintain it's predestined like walking a track in the forest, and every step you make makes a new path, but you don't know if somebody's been on that path before you. It could be a wolf track. And it's also really interesting sort of going down that area, because in many instances when people go camping and they walk towards the river, they go in single file through the long grass. Have you ever watched that happen? That's an if. What actually happens if the person up front gets bitten by the person up front, if there's going to be an attack, the person up front is going to cop it. If it's going to be a clever attack, the person at the back is going to cop it. That's when the word if can matter. At other times, if is like the word hope. It's absolutely silly. It's like the word to, T-O-O. One should never use the word to, unless it means also, or as well as. Then it's valid. Otherwise, you're going to be guilted, or you're guilting somebody else, or you're guilting yourself. rat voices often use the word too. You're too old. You're too fat. You're too ugly. It's too early.
Can I share a little story rather than a question, or for your consideration? I
Oh,
feel
you can be R2D2 tonight too. You know that too, don't you? As well as.
they're working so good, and I don't feel I couldn't bear to see myself in the little thing in the corner when I had that stupid fucking headband on. So it's really good. Um,
Something.
the, the ten of cups. Uh, almost two years ago, um, a little girl in my family disappeared. And she'd been missing 7 days, and I was gifted. I was given a ticket to a holotropic breathwork session, and I was expected to go as part of my job. And I did this breath thing that I had no experience of. I didn't really know a lot of it. And we're getting geared up doing the breathwork practice, and it's two sharp inhales and an exhale. So you're basically like provoking a type of hyperventilation, I guess. And we're getting minutes in it. And my experience of fucking reality started to shift. And as I was inhaling, so two inhales, I was getting my mum, who Susie, who you know has passed,
You're
was
dead.
getting yeah, she's dead. Sorry, yeah. It was like one inhale was Susie, the next inhale was Cheyenne, and then as I exhaled, I was getting 10 of cups, and it was just going, 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 going. And then I passed out, broke through, and was floating through the fucking infinite. And it was the first time I'd experienced that, which I came to experience many times in the 10-week working that we did, sort of becoming the energy. But I was conscious of the fact that, well, I knew she was dead, because it was like Mum Cheyenne, 10 of cups, Mum Cheyenne, 10 of cups. And then I broke through and they were both there, not like a picture of them or whatever, but they were both there and they were safe and well. And they wanted me to know that, and that they were actually completely unattached to everything that was going on. But because I was familiar with story of the Ten of Cups, or the knowledge from you of the Ten of Cups, I knew at that time that Cheyenne was dead. And for a long time, even the reporting in the media was that the police weren't doing enough, and the reporting in the media was that the narrative was that she was a runaway, and she wasn't found for some 4 months later. But anyway, that's my story about the Ten of Cups. I knew she was dead.
Interestingly enough, also on that level, I was with a person in the last week or 2 weeks or whatever. I was quite amazed. She had such an incredibly interesting viewpoint towards the idea of life and death and theory and hypothesis. And yes, she's a scholar. And we talked for ages about the ness and about flesh and discorporation and all that went with it. And getting to the idea of, well, what is a physical body? What is the physical body if we've got the nurse? And even apart from the Ten of Cups, the Foundation Tarot gave me the Four of Pentacles. And the Four of Pentacles is just this containment. It says you're contained. And I was like, for fuck's sake, is it that simple? And then I went, of course it's that simple, because if you remove the skin, we just go, And where's the ness of us when we go splat? So that was another way of tarot teaching me what the physical body is that sense of the four, it came up with the Four of Pentacles. So I'd make a note of that if you're looking at life and death, etc. I mean, otherwise the Four of Pentacles is not the Four of Pentacles, it's very often a time sequence. That was the first time I've seen it as the containment of life, the force of life itself, and muscle, blood, and bone, and sinew, and and ligament, and fascia, and all that goes, and fats, and everything that goes with it, and proteins, and blah blah. It's all contained. But when it's not contained, doesn't mean it's any less living. That's the interesting thing in the Ten of Cups that you would have experienced there to do with that dead person, is they were no longer necessarily contained, and therefore they were Earth. And Earth is home, ultimately. That's the whole point, is that this planet is it. No matter what else, it's what we see. As far as manifestation goes, this planet is home. Yeah, so thanks for that. I do that breath work every night before I go to bed. It's really, really beneficial to, I find it very beneficial to being grounded, to leveling out. Holotropic breath work, I think, is really, really comforting. And I do that, yeah, every night. On the odd occasion, once every blue moon, I think I get lazy, don't do it. And I can feel it the next day. But it also really works at clearing a lot of what I call fluff from in my psyche. Yeah. Anybody, any else? Any other questions? Oh, it was the trees that told me to do it, by the way, when I first started. Because they said, we can use your oxygen. Give us your fucking oxygen. And so I knew enough about holotropic breath work to be able to sort of like play that tune as well. And yeah, it does all kinds of weird things when I do it at night, particularly outside, because the wind will come up the minute I start doing it. Like, we can carry that. It's nice. Yeah. And it is very, very leveling in a weird kind of way. It's the weirdest thing. It's like when I was a kid and we're in I spent a year in a Catholic school, and we used to get in the girls' toilets, and everybody would do this deep breathing until you fainted. And fainting was the thing. It was fun. Anyway, more questions, or are we done?
I had one final question. It was just so whenever I look at this card, I need to get more familiar with them, but my mind always draws a blank. Do you have any cards that you find like tricky when they come up and you see them, and you've got a sort of, it doesn't work that way with you?
It does. The thing is, when I draw, I don't care when I draw blank. So there'll be a table full of cards, and quite often I'll look at two or three, I'll go, what's that? I mean, this is in me, I'll go, what's that? And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really say anything. So I'm not going to mention it. And then when it turns up in the next map, this is why I'll do 10 maps in a reading, or 5 or 6 or 7. When it turns up in context, then I don't lose the first time it's turned up, but I haven't got to bother with it because it's bookmarking itself, if you get me. And then when it turns up in context, then I can go with it. And I'll always remember how I saw it before. I'll go, oh, there it was. It'll turn up, for example, with the Strength card later on, and it'll turn up with the Four of Pentacles later on, and it's a little black dog. And the person's just gone out and got themselves a little black dog. It really is a small animal. And that can turn up with all of their pages as well. They're not necessarily fleshly human children. They can be smaller other animals. You know, one turned up the other day, which was a page of cups with a strength card and a devil card, and I said, you're going to get a Rottweiler. And of course it's there, and they do, or they already have, and they'll tell you all about it because they're considered to be a dangerous species. Not that humans aren't. So what are you going to do if you get a person of wands, for example, with a devil card and a strength card? You've got a dangerous human being. And that person can be a beast. Now, that's an interesting thing to say. Can I back that up with something else? 21st century, dealing with a lot of people. Is this just my experience? I don't think so. A lot of people who are obese or very fat are aggressive. Overpowering, overwhelming, particularly in positions like in offices, and particularly to do with women. I find them aggressive time and time again. And they they want to, this is never clients. But if I go shopping and there's a big woman, she's usually very aggressive. It's not the same with men, which is funny, which is makes me question what that's all about. And I've then looked at it seriously, and I've found that women who get very large do so to protect themselves. And it's a kind of self-defense, don't like me because I'm too big. Except for the fact a lot of heterosexual guys like big women. Go figure. But in a group of women, particularly in a situation to do with supermarkets when they're together, in an office when they're together, and very often even when you're reading somebody's cards and they're maybe lean as any one of you here, they're having real problems with somebody in the office. They say, are they a big person? And they'll go, yes. It's like, I've got this big, now don't fuck with me because I'm big. And it's a strange one, but I thought I'll add it in here because you will come across it. I've asked people time and time again, and it's like, it's very often. So what's happening when you look at a whole country like America with the obesity crisis that's happening there, which is coming here, which has gone to China? John Gabriel writes about that with weight gain and self-protection. I don't know John Gabriel, but yeah, it particularly happens with women. It doesn't happen with big men. Big men, quite often it's because they claim power. It's almost like as if they have sucked or siphoned the life out of somebody else. Very often. And very often with big men, I find it's a strange one because big men, I find them like bears. And I have an absolute attraction to big men. The bigger the better. Give me a big man and I'll put my arms around him. Give me a skinny man and I feel like I'm dealing in here with a drug addict. You could drop it any time. It's a very weird thing. It's like people who walk too fast. No. Okay. More. Tarot, 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 tarot.
What's with people who walk too fast?
People who walk too fast, and that's why I've got everybody to walk slowly. Have you ever noticed that people walk too fast? I found it in, I discovered it in Melbourne, and I also found it in the Byron region. I had to, people who walk too fast are usually distressed, so in psychosis, or they're meth addicts. And it's heaps. And when people walk slowly, it's like it's a body language thing. It's an animal thing. It's nothing that can be put into us to a necessarily box. But people who walk too fast, it's weird. My daughter used to walk really, really quickly, and I said, can you slow down and see if it makes a difference? But when she walks really quickly, she actually struts and she's upright. And so she strides. There's a difference between walking too fast and striding.
Wait, one last question, and it's just because I just was looking at these out of curiosity. So, like, what would this, have I got it the right way around for it, or the decent way around? What would this mean?
Well, it's pretty much two on their own. I need a third card. Pull me a third card.
What's third card? All right. Actually, yeah, let's use this card.
Oh, well, there you go. Sort of one thing ends, another one begins, doesn't it? Because that's this whole thing around love and trust and respect and etc. When it ends, it ends. And then, of course, when it comes afterwards, it becomes very, very different because there's something coming which is not the same as before. And again, what we talked about earlier, the person's looking at the ideas of what love is, and it's going to turn up and be completely different. But it's really important, I think, to know that love does finish, and it's interesting. Talking to, again, my housemate who's an official at weddings, what do they call them, a celebrant. And we have debates, I guess is the best way, because she was having this sort of wickedly kind of binding thing in the way she would write out these vows for people. And I would get in a corner and curl up in a fetal ball when she'd say it. And she said, why are you doing that? You're acting again, Lord. She'd say, you're acting again. I said, yeah, I am. Not like this. And she's saying, why are you doing that? Okay, because you're using the word binding in a relationship to do with love. Which, of course, would be the Eight of Swords. Something you can't get out of. It turn up with the Justice card for prison. Then she said, well, how should I put it? Without where I am binding them together in love. I said, no, binding and love don't go in the same sentence as each other. As long as love lasts, that's the Ace of Cups and Death card. Because there's sort of like, if you can accept that it may not last, and I do use the expression, trying to keep love alive is like trying to keep your dead granny in your next bedroom. After 2 weeks, it's going to really start to stink. You get it? And it's the same with any relationship. When time's up, you know it's up. You can feel it in your groin. And it tends to spread up to your brain after. But your groin picks it up first, and then your guts pick it up, and then your heart picks it up, and you start to hurt. And then you want to go into denial over the fact that it's fucking over, but you know it's over. And so it's like dragging out the impossible. Because you can't bring love back once it's died. It can become something else, but it's not love. And interestingly enough, when love dies, it dies. That relationship is going nowhere. And I don't know anything crueler than attempting to keep something alive when it's dead. It would be like, I love you so much, I'm going to put you in a cage and lock the door and keep you there. It's cool. Yeah. So that you can pick up any cards, any cups, and mix them up together. I'll give you an answer. If you want to do that. It's only 5 to 10 here, got half an hour. Well, it's 4 people trying. Come on, give me cards. Hold them up, please, Marks, here. All together. All together. Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that's a process of physical transformation that's taking place, which is really rather interesting because I'd need more cards to go with that, but the physical transformation can be somebody, for example, without the other cards in there, who's had breast implants, who's had a physical major change, because the Judgment card is where your real key is in that. But there's a real sense of stress that's taking place. There's no real danger showing up, even though earlier we talked about the Page of Cups with the Strength card and the Devil card being a Rottweiler. The fact that the Rottweiler doesn't work with the Judgment card, can you see what I mean? If you look at them, it doesn't work that way. So what it is a feeling of real entrapment that it has to do with self, because the one thing I'm very aware of with the devil card, like with anybody who gets into religion or anybody who ends up with addictions within themselves, they walk into it without necessarily knowing the ramifications. So, for example, a person who is going for plastic surgery to get a Brazilian butt lift, that would turn up. You may end up with the death card Ace of Swords if they're going to have one of those aneurysms go down, but it's really important to keep up with the news. For example, that one would be definitely typical of somebody who is really, really going through processes. If they have a mummy makeover, you have a look at those three. That's what that is. Everybody see those three? Things like a mummy makeover. So they're having their breasts and their belly done. They're going to get cut from hip to hip. They're going to have the skin pulled up. They're going to have their muscles sewn up together. They're going to have the skin pulled down. And they're going to have stitches all the way around. And if it doesn't get infected, they'd be very fucking lucky. So that's that. And one of the clues in that one, when you're looking at it, is the cross. The red cross has got to do with the medical field, more so than the caduceus. Because, for example, in Melbourne, you'll get St. John's Ambulance, and St. John's is associated with the Red Cross. And when you get the Red Cross, also that could be places like Yemen, if it could be places, because you've got the devil card and the strength card can be places under siege. But it would not be somewhere that was tropical, because the strength card represents desert area. Do you get it? So if I was looking at somebody, for example, if I have somebody coming to visit me who's from Ethiopia, and I get that, I know what's going on with their family back home. And you've got the red cross on the ground, because that cross gives it away every time. It's in a couple of cards, but when that will turn up as well, you'll get that red cross turn up when somebody's doing their senior first aid certificate, because they'll do it in Australia under St. John's Ambulance. So those three are really juicy. Thank you. Yeah. And again, it could be prophetic, because I mean, I'm biased because I know what's going on in Palestine. So I'm really biased when I look at them, and I'm seeing the aid trucks going in there, and that's the judgment card. So would it be somewhere else that hasn't happened yet? Could be, but I'm pulling on what I know. And that's what's happening now, which is in our fucking faces, to do with an atrocity that's happening in Rwanda. It's happening to sort of like in Myanmar. It's happening in a lot of different places, in a lot of different circumstances. But the devil card with the strength card is that very dangerous desert area. Cool.
I had another question. It's not a couplet. Well, it's not like a couplet question, but when you mentioned the tower earlier, and I wanted to check with you. How do I? Does the tower ever represent an erection?
No.
No.
Great question.
Maybe that's just wishful thinking.
Great question. Men have erections every morning. Sorry, there's not a man I've ever met who hasn't had an erection at least once. That wouldn't exactly be a prophecy, would it? You know, but it could be with the tower and the two of cups. It could be, because if it came to a health crisis, a health problem, there's a difference between chronic, which would be the devil card or the moon card, and acute. If it's acute, it's going to show up as the tower. So that if you get the devil card and the tower together, like we got when we got those three together, devil, death, and tower fairly recently, it's something that's acute and chronic simultaneously. That's somebody with COPD who gets pneumonia. So the chronic illness would be the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And the pneumonia would be the acute one, it's an infection. See how the two would go together there really, really easily? And it would be similar to an earthquake. So you've got this rumbling underneath the surface, and then it goes on the surface, which is the tower. In difference to a massive weather front, like you've just had in England and just had in Ireland and just had in Wales, okay? Which would be the tower, very definitely, but it had the moon card with it, because that's water. So it doesn't have a health implication. It's just fucking wet and very, very windy. Good question. There's no problematic questions that can come out of you guys. They're always interesting. Any others? And there's nothing too small, seemingly small. Oh, Fiona. No, not Fiona. Fiona has got one. You haven't got three.
I've got one.
Victoria. Have you got three there, Fiona?
I have got three, but one stuck in my book, but it's those three. It's the Six of Swords, the Three of Cups, and the Four of Cups.
That's definitely a reunion with people from across water.
Hmm.
There's more coming than just the three. There's unexpected outcomes to that. That's like, there could be an extra person. So one of the three people that you love that's from over water has got a baby or got a lover or got some other person in there. So there's four people, not three.
Four
There's-
people because of what?
Because the Four of Cups, not the Three of Cups. The Three of Cups is the expected reunion. The Three of Cups can be a reunion. But the Four of Cups adds in the additional cup in there, you see.
Okay.
Have a look. See the Three of Cups that they're celebrating?
Yeah.
And then have a look at the next one, the Three of Cups on the ground. They're the same Three of Cups.
There's another one added.
There's another one added. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for. They're your patterns.
Mm-hmm.
For
Okay.
sure. Yay. And Victoria, you had three. Okay. Well, that's unexpectedly very healthy. There's a form of earth medicine in there because of the temperance card and the strength card together. But the Fool card doesn't let us know what it is. So the Fool card is saying that those three together are something that's not recognized at this particular point in time, but it's very definitely got to do with earth medicine because of the temperance card and the strength card together. Totally. And if it was for you, I'd say make sure you check your dog out. You don't want him to have worms. Because it could relate to something to do with health or medicine that's not necessarily seen or recognized at this particular moment in time. There's nothing problematic in it. As you can tell, there's no swords in there to worry about. There's no illusions in there. Just with the strength card and the temperance card, that's health, not illness, because there's no illness in there. That's actually health and medical health as well. So it's someone who was declared. If you had before that somebody who had a devil card and a Seven of Pentacles and a Four of Swords, that's somebody who's got a cancer, for example, or a malignancy. And then there's a treatment that goes down, which would have to do with radiation, which is going to be a star card. And it's interestingly enough, a tower, and you would have something else in there as well. Can't remember what now. Usually an Ace of Swords, so they're having some kind of injection to do with it, which has got to do with the chemotherapy. And this one is if I had that for somebody who'd had cancer, I'd say there's remission. Definitely. And there's a real sense of it. There's no growth associated with it. There's nothing growing. There's actually nothing extra. It's just temperance card and strength card health. It's almost the word. But the Fool card goes, what the fuck? Health. Oh. That's what I would say to the client who had those three. Okay. Oh, all right. Okay. So that's someone in talking into themselves. Now, this is really interesting with those three that you're holding up there. So you've got the Seven of Wands with the Page of Swords, which we talked about as an idea. And the Two of Swords is looking within. So you've got that inner thought, that inner idea. So it's like a eureka moment without being huge, but it's the thinking process itself more than anything else, what you're looking at there. And the conversations that do take place intelligently within consciousness. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Some of these are good. Now I'm having fun now.
Law, would this represent what we were talking about earlier with me feeling like you're inside my mind? Okay, that's funny.
Yes. Yeah. It could also be, I mean, we could actually look, if it was to do, that's my first intuition when I look at those three. My second one, which is quite rational, would be a child who seems to do a lot of talking but says nothing. And it's very interesting because something like those three could turn up for like an Aquarian child who is suffering from selective mutism. Because of the Two of Swords, that silence, and yet the talkativeness that goes with it beside the other side of it is you've almost got an oxymoron with it. If you're actually looking at a child, you've got the talk, but not in anybody in particular. That's what the Seven of Wands is. It's like a school teacher, but there's nothing in those three to indicate a school teacher. So it's someone who's doing talk, and they're not bothering who they're talking to, but they also could be doing it internally. So it can be, and I have encountered selective mutism before as a form of people on the spectrum have selective mutism, and they wonder what's happening with their child. I go, their child's talking, just not to you.
Can I ask about that experience again? So when that happened to me with tarot, I sort of thought, wow, this is different, this is new, and as if I'd had a sudden view very far ahead into the future. So it was quite overwhelming. But I imagine that a lot of clients can find it confronting.
No.
Okay, you don't deal with that very often? Okay.
No, I haven't never dealt with it. Because I was a bitch from the beginning. I didn't care what I was at the
Say if a client is saying, oh, you've done this to me, where either you've gotten inside my head or you've made this thing happen, it just doesn't affect you.
They don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a reputation. And that's 45 years old. It's a long, it's older than my young two children. I mean, and this is why I never advertise. And people say, why don't you advertise? Because I'm dangerous. And people who come, they come knowing that they don't know what they're going to get, and they're game. I fucking think that everybody who sits opposite me is very, very game. And they might hate what I'm saying, but I go, you got a record. I make certain everybody records the session. And it comes in really handy because I got that one. I think I mentioned to you, but you may not have been here, but I did see, I heard from a woman from the Byron region I read for 21 years ago. And it told her in a warning spread that I could see her living in a house with a murderer, get out at the only available exit. And she hadn't even got married. She got married not long after. The guy was lovely. And they grew two sons together, and the kids ended up going off to Sydney to university, and she split up with him amicably, and she moved in when another guy tried to kill her. So she contacted me after 21 years saying, I thought I'd forgotten it until he tried to choke me. And she got out the bathroom window and ran away. So it can wait that long. But you can't care. As a reader, you can't care what, I mean, I'm full of compassion. I love them. I love every person that sits with me, and I can never express how much that love is. It's just at their courage for coming, and the fact they feed me. And I don't care if I'm right or wrong. It's not about being right or wrong either. It didn't even happen when I first started working for the public, because that was in a public space in fucking Westfield Plaza in Sydney. And that was for lines and lines of people. I can't do that now. I can do one person in a day. And then I've got to wait. It'll be 2 or 3 days before I see them. So I'm still going into February this year. But then, no, they don't. I mean, so you won't, I mean, if you're bothered by it, you don't go into this kind of work. How many of you read full time? I never have asked you. I will let you know that until you're reading full time, this is not going to work for you.
How do you know when to start?
Now,
Reading for people.
straight away. Yeah, so what's not going to work? Tarot's not going to work for you. Okay, so this is really significant. Once you start, if you stop, it's like Tarot's going to say, fuck you. Now, once you start, you will get to a point where there's a thing called the plateau. We discussed the plateau, where you will plateau and then you will doubt yourself and you've just got to fucking keep going anyway. But if you stop, Tarot's not going to work with you. And then you'll second guess yourself and you'll start explaining the cards. You won't be working tarot. You'll be explaining the fucking cards. And any mother can do that out of a book. It doesn't trigger that extra sense, which is all 5 senses, but they're all a 6th sense. They're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, fucking, there's that many senses. So that all the other ones, I can smell when I'm reading tarot, I can taste. It's been a principle not to advertise, and it's also been a principle with social media never to check on a person. I never check on a person. And they're actually weirded out the fact that I haven't checked on who they are. I said, no, I have no fucking idea. Because other people go looking. And you make it a principle not to, because again, you're going to get all the information you need, but the best place to start to market, $10 a reading, 5 minutes, 3 cards, go home. And I mean, even before I really got going in my 20s, I went to see a woman named Jan, and she was reading it on a hospital bed table in a bedroom at a tarot party. And I went and sat with her, and she's fagging away, and she threw out 3 cards. She said, you're going to have the worst 2 weeks of your life, and then you're going to be fine. And I looked at it, and she put her hand out and said, it'll be $10. It was in 1978 or something. And I said, for fucking what? And she said, I've just told you, you're going to have 2 weeks, 2 of the worst weeks of your life, and then your life will be fine. Fuck off. Give me your money. And I did, and I huffed out of there like you would not believe. And the rest of it's in my memoir as to what those 2 weeks were. But she was absolutely correct. And it doesn't mean my life hasn't been without extremely interesting and discordant chaos that I've had to fix up time and time again. But she was fucking right. And even before, when the person that I was in love with said, I'll go ahead to England 2 weeks before you and Adam can come over when I've got the house set up, I went, there's the 2 weeks. And then a little inner voice goes, no, it's not. No, it's not. I went, fuck you, little inner voice, rat voice, you go fuck yourself. And it wasn't. It was when I got there. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life, and I had to end up phoning Australia for the plane tickets to come back home again. It's fucking shocking. So when it's on, it's on. And you don't wait. You start straight away, and you go to a market and you set up, and you don't give a fuck if you get nobody all day. You've also got to watch where you don't get trapped in your own, with there's something, I don't know what it is. I don't want to call it arrogance. I don't want to call it ego. I don't know what it is. It's like the wrong kind of, like something almost, for lack of a better word, demonic. And you know how I've told you about how a Ouija board turns and says, I'm going to kill your cat. And you're going to get raped and you're going to be dead in 15 days. Oh, it will. That's Ouija boards. I stopped using them. They turn. There's a long story around that. We haven't got time tonight about Ouija boards. But they can turn. And this work can turn you, if you're not careful, into a fucking egotistical piece of arsehole, that absolute condescending. And then you find it easier sometimes to lie to clients, and that's when the trouble comes in. So this, again, one person they were on the Australian Idol. This is years ago. And it was a woman who won, but part of their prize, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks before the final, was they were on the Sydney Harbour with a famous tarot reader who was telling this particular woman, and I'm sitting there looking at the tower crowned by the fucking Ace of Wands, and I'm going, that's throat. Because that's like an acute throat infection. And I'm looking at it, and the woman's saying how nice her future's going to be. Well, she was sort of right, but she missed that one, or she didn't tell her on air. And I did what I never do, which is to go on their fucking board where you write your messages, their message board thing. And I went, tell her to look after her throat. And about 2 weeks later, when she sung, and she was an amazing singer, and the judges all said, considering the virus you've just had that's affected your throat and your streptococcal, it's amazing that you've been able to get that song out. So you'll see it wherever you are, wherever tarot will turn up, it's going to tell you, but go to the markets and set it up now. Don't wait, and don't think. If you've had a good look at all these, and we've gone through the videos, and it's in there. And it's absolutely, it's just fear. And fear has got no place when there's nothing coming at you to hurt you. And with enough knowledge, which you've all got, you set yourself up, you find a spot that's not going to be muddy and wet, make it as private as possible, because that's really important. I don't work anywhere publicly where people can see what I'm doing. This is absolutely a secret. And if it's really, really problematic or hard to tell, say, I hope I'm fucking wrong, but I can see this, this, and this. And then when you're first doing it, they're going to try all kinds of tricks on you, the owner. They're going to try all kinds of tricks. What if I do this? What if I do that? What if I do something else? What if I don't take the offer up? What if I don't go here? What if I don't change addresses? What happens then? But you will, I say. That's what had happened when I moved to Victoria first time. I started in the markets. When I moved to Byron for the first time, I started in the markets. When I moved here, no, I didn't even bother. They just started coming. And eventually it'll get the word, it spreads all around the fucking world. I get people from everywhere. Most wonderful people from the most wonderful countries. And even when I ended up in Ireland, in the fucking west coast at Roundstone, and I'm knocking on that woman's door, and I go inside the fucking artist Rosa McGowan's studio to get paint for Scott to do his artwork, and then somebody calls my name from the back room, and it's Sheena Keane, and she was in Byron in 1992, had a reading, says, did you bring your cards with you? How the fuck did that happen? So, and I threw 3 cards out for her that night and said, car trouble. She made me dinner. And the next day she was due to go to Manchester to watch the big football game, and she was driving up to Belfast to catch the plane across to England, and the car wouldn't start. Now, you've got to say chicken and the egg, yes. But so she stayed, and we ended up watching the Tour de Bog together, and watching that, and having the crack in the local pub, and eating the fucking chowder fresh off the boats. But when she organised for me to come back for the book launch, she'd also organised me clients. And I left Ireland with over $9,000 in my wallet. And they were still phoning to book in as we're driving to the airport. So I'm saying start. And it really does come down to you've got to trust yourself and not care and not put yourself in the idea of right and wrong. You know these cards, you know their meanings. And if you got it, and it's the first thing that comes off the top of your head. I mean, if the first thing that comes on the top of your head, which Lee thought might have been an erection, that's saying you're going to have a sexual relationship, and it's totally and absolutely fucked. And they'll say to you, well, can I avoid it? And go, well, no, it'll be the next one. It'll be the one that you didn't avoid. But then something rich will happen for you after that, if you accept your destiny in that situation. And then it'll turn into sort of like that and that and that. And then you might get that after it. And then you might get that after it. And you go, oh, same thing, it's still fucked. But you can see it the minute you lay them out in the order. You've got the patterns. Yes. You've got the maps.
So 2 things. Do you remember the first reading you did? And you don't? No. Well, it was just because you said that when you actually start doing it, it's like another sense comes in. So it's like you're not going to get that when you're doing it, looking at the cards, but there's something else that comes into it. Obviously, it's tarot coming into it, but
I never remember a reading until later.
No, I don't remember what the cards were, but what that sense, what was the thing?
Deep and an attitude. Because if this is your destiny, then it's your destiny. But remember I told you about the dream where I was sitting on the chair and I had the perspex walls on either side of me and there was people sitting on the chairs in every direction as far as I could see, left or right. And I was terrified to get up and walk ahead in case there was nothing. So I just sat on the chair. It was one of the worst dreams I've ever had in my life. That's pretty much where you are if you're not doing this work. If it's your destiny to do this work, you'll get off your ass and you'll go and you'll get stuck in. You'll find a place in the market. They might ask you for insurance. Suck it up, pay it, sit on the ground, make sure you've got a private space. So get a little big Kellogg's cornflakes box or something, just to give some privacy. And that privacy is almost a ritual within itself. So I always had a tent. When I was in Dalesford, I used to have a van. And I used to decorate it all because people will not only come for you, they'll come for the experience. So in some ways, in a weird kind of way, it's theatre. Because they don't just come to see a dag sitting around smoking a fag saying you've got 2 fucking weeks worth of shit and then your life's never going to be a problem again. I wouldn't have gone to see her if I was any older or if I thought I knew better. It's like, this is a set. I mean, everywhere I live looks like this now, fair enough. But it's sort of a set. You get me? It's just not a planned one. But there are days that people just turn up and I'm in my pajamas and I'm in total fucking Dagsville. And they'll come into the house here and I'll say, I couldn't be bothered putting my fucking shoes on. You all right with that? And they're going, yeah, fine. They couldn't care less. And the older I get, the easier it is. And I did promise myself at one stage when I get really, really old, I'll just work in the jammies and the Ugg boots and not give a shit. And I don't give a shit now. So you get there. Because if you're right, you're never going to know it until they come back to see. So what kind of risk are you fucking taking? That they're going to rubbish you? It's all in your head. It's all in your sense of self. This fear thing, this anxiety around not doing it. And you might have to be pushed. And if this pushes you, this conversation pushes you, fucking I'm pushing you out the door. I want to see you working. That's why we're doing this. I'm not going to lose clients over you. Do you get it? If I was going to lose clients, I would have lost clients when I moved state the first time. It's just got more. But the other thing is, if I'm feeling really down and low, I'm thinking, oh, I've got a client at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'll get an email saying that can't possibly come this afternoon. Can we delay it and postpone it? Keep the money in the bank. Can we make it next week? Tarot works with you. Tarot will work with you. It's like the biggest, fluffiest puppy dog you've ever come across. But it's a Rottweiler as well. It's not you they come to see. They come to see themselves mirrored in you. 100%. It's for them that they come. Can you work that out in your head? It's the most important information I'll ever give you. Not about us. Love you and leave you. I'm out of here now.
Thank you.